Okay, so in the mouth, we start mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. So when we look at mechanical, again, we're thinking of muscles of mastication or chewing. We've seen the masseter muscle, the buccinator muscle, the temporalis muscle, all participating in mastication. So the tongue and some of those other muscles, again, that we looked at with the musculoskeletal system, are going to enable mechanical digestion to occur, and subsequently breaking some of those larger macro, big molecules, those big proteins, and the big chunk of steak, or the potato, or with the butter on it. We've got to, you don't really have to chew butter, right? Oh, but it tastes so good. But anyway, there are all of the foods that we're consuming. Nuts, for instance, they've got some really good fats in them. So, along with proteins. So it's important for us to be chewing and mechanically breaking those items down. So then the stomach and the rest of the GI tract don't have to work so hard to get those micronutrients out of there, to get those amino acids, carbohydrates, and fatty acids. So mechanical digestion in the mouth. So chew your food is what I'm getting at. We also see something else occurring in the oral cavity or the mouth. And over here we see the salivary glands, and we know the salivary gland, we've all heard of saliva. It does more than just keep the mouth hydrated or lubricated or moist. So, pardon me, there's some saliva right there. I meant to do that. That a visual aid, uh, beyond just this guy here. So anyway, salivary glands do more than just secrete saliva to keep the mouth hydrated. They also secrete what's called amylase, and we'll look at that briefly coming up. AMYLASE. We see the ace on the end of amylase. That's a trigger that our brain should be thinking, oh, we're dealing with an enzyme. And remember, an enzyme is a chemical that's going to speed up a reaction. It's going to enable something large to become smaller bits relatively quickly, or the other way. It's going to enable small bits to become a large chunk quickly. So add an enzyme, reactions are going to speed up. Enzymes end in the letters ASE. Again, we looked at that briefly at the beginning of the semester. We haven't seen it for a while. So here's where it comes into play again. Your saliva and your salivary glands are actually starting the process of chemical digestion. So mechanical, the actual act of doing something mechanical, and then chemical digestion actually begins in the mouth. And specifically, it's going to be carbohydrates or sugars. So we do see carbohydrate digestion begin in the mouth. This is the reason I've said it 2 or 3 times is I wanted you to etch that into your long-term memory banks. Again, we'll go through it in advance next semester, but this is a type of question, or these, your NCLEX or your TEAS exams, they're going to have a couple of digestive system questions. And they're going to have questions from all the body systems, of course, and they're going to have clinical questions as well, potentially, that relate back to these body systems and your knowledge of where things are located. So one of the questions that's you're going to see almost invariably will involve, where does X digestion occur? Where does protein digestion begin, I should say? Where does carbohydrate digestion begin? Where does lipid digestion begin? So those, you need to know that order and where these three big molecules start being digested. So the mouth is where carbohydrate digestion begins. Now, I want it to be clear as well, because this has come up on TEAS exams and NCLEX exams. Students are asked, where does carbohydrate digestion begin? Well, the mouth, right? Another student will be asked, where does protein digestion begin? And we'll see in a few minutes it's the stomach. So we're working our way down. But when they ask you the question about where does this chemical, protein, carb, fat, digestion begin, they mean chemically, not mechanically. All digestion, carbs, proteins, fats, you know, water, even things you drink, all digestion begins in the mouth. But when they ask you about a specific macromolecule, they're asking you where does the chemical digestion begin. So don't overthink that. Okay. Carbs in the mouth, proteins in the stomach. Okay. Then we'll get to fats after that. So, anyway, salivary glands help to do that. We have three major salivary glands. We have the largest one back kind of around the TMJ area called the parotid with a P, not carotid with a C like the artery, but parotid like the gland. That's going to secrete some salivary amylase. So it's going to assist again with the breakdown of carbohydrates. We'll see, and you can feel that tingling going on a little bit when if you haven't eaten for a while, or and you put something really sweet in your mouth, or you can almost feel that tingling occur a little bit back there on occasion. And then we have what's called the submandibular gland and then the sublingual gland. So we'll look at those up close in a few minutes. One of those will secrete primarily saliva with primarily as mucus and as water, not a lot of enzyme. And then the other one will secrete a little bit of both. And then, like it's the parotid, will secretes primarily amylase with a little bit of water and other items. All right. So anyway, the mouth and the teeth and the tongue and the salivary glands all start the process of mechanical and chemical digestion, specifically in the chemical area, carbohydrates or sugars. Carbohydrates, we'll see later on, are really can be what we call polysaccharides, meaning they're very long chains. You know them as starches. So your potatoes and your pastas, those are going to be your long chain carbohydrates. So we have to get those broken down into single 6-carbon glucoses or fructose. So anyway, galactose. So we'll look at that later on in more detail. But the process of starches being broken, polys being broken into di, which are two carbon or two sugars put together, two sugar rings put together. Okay. So we go from many rings together to breaking them into groups of 2 rings together. That's what the amylase is doing in the mouth. So even more specific than carbohydrate or sugar digestion, we'll even go so far as to say starch digestion begins in the mouth. So anyhow, then your teeth and tongue form all of that food into little tiny balls called one is called a bolus, bolus. So we're going to be swallowing a bolus. Okay, and then another bolus, and then another bolus, a little ball of food, and that little ball of food is going to be swallowed. We'll see that is called deglutition. So we've got mastication and then deglutition, which is swallowing, and then we're going to see squeezing or peristalsis of the rhythmic moving and squeezing around the bolus as it travels through. We'll see a form of moving that food called peristalsis. We'll see another form later on as we go called segmentation. So we'll see a few different ways in which we get food to move. Once we swallow it, it's really kind of out of your conscious control, right? We're even when we're chewing, sometimes we're not conscious. We should be, but anyway, you're using more voluntary aspects of your musculature and your nervous system when you're actually chewing and eating. Once you swallow, though, you're done. It's going to do what it's going to do, right? So we would call that more autonomic, right? Automatic or autonomic. So uh, yeah. So how do I get the food to get assimilated, broken down, and then packed, the waste packed and delivered to the toilet? Well, I don't have much control over that, right? Boom, eat it, done. And then I have to go poop at some point, and I have a little bit of control over that, thankfully. And then how did it go 20 feet, without me doing anything about it? Well, again, we see that autonomic movement. There's a rhythmic squeezing that goes on to move everything through. Remember, it's a tube from mouth to anus. So it's just a constant squeezing of getting things out. That's why sometimes if you haven't pooped for a while, kind of constipated, a lot of times just drinking water, getting that digestive system activated, certainly fiber and other things help with that. But yeah, first thing in the morning when you get up after you're sleeping, they say, should first thing that should go in your mouth, brush your teeth, of course. But after you've brushed your teeth and gone potty, you should just room temperature, even water. Just get before you have coffee, if you drink coffee, before you have tea, before you have milk, before you have juice, before you have anything, just drink straight water, get the ball rolling. Some folks will put a little slice of lemon in the water and drink it that way. But that's really one of the kind of tenets of having a healthy digestive tract, is every morning getting it activated with just drinking water. So again, after you've brushed your teeth, you don't want all that morning overnight goop getting down there. So anyway, once you start swallowing these boli or go through deglutition, we're going to get the squeezing and rhythmic movement through the esophagus. And then, so the esophagus we see is in that mediastinum area. And then it doesn't show it on here, but the diaphragm would be here. We're going to see the liver and the esophagus all underneath, or just inferior to the diaphragm. The esophagus does continue through the diaphragm, not for very long, but just as it passes through the diaphragm, we now enter into the stomach. And we'll see that the stomach and where the esophagus ends and the stomach begins, there's going to be a little sphincter there. So a sphincter is sort of like a valve. It helps to prevent backflow. A sphincter also kind of helps regulate traffic as boluses or boli continue to travel into that area. Okay, so the stomach area, the stomach region, or the stomach, it's the gastric region. The stomach is the next organ along the digestive tract, and that's where we're going to see protein digestion begin. So protein digestion begins in the stomach. We're going to see a few different enzymes, a few different chemicals in the stomach. We'll also see hydrochloric acid when we get there as well. So stomach acid is normal. When stomach acid gets into the esophagus, that can be a problem. We can, they call that heartburn or acid reflux or GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disorder. Okay, gastro means stomach, and esophageal means esophagus. So the GE, gastroesophageal, reflux. Used to be acid reflux. I think it's the same thing, right? Now that a lot of stuff's over the counter for acid reflux, Prilosec and some of that. Again, we'll get into acid reflux in more detail next semester. I don't want to get too far off the beaten path, but all of you have heard of that, and you've maybe heard of those others as well: heartburn, and GERD, and acid reflux. They all generally are talking about the same thing. All right, so we'll continue in the digestive tract. So we've got a sphincter that opens from the esophagus into the stomach. We'll give that a name, the lower esophageal sphincter. Again, that's oftentimes involved with ulcerations and heartburns and things like that. The stomach, we're going to see the lining is going to be more ridged. We're going to have deep folds. They call them rugae. So we'll see some rugae or folds coming up as well. As we leave the stomach, we're going to have another sphincter. This time they call it the pyloric sphincter. Uh, so, well, again, kind of regulation of flow, preventing backflow. That's the big deal with a sphincter. So it's like a modification in the musculature of the tract. All right, so as we leave the stomach, we enter into the small intestines. We call that first section. There are three sections of small intestine, by the way. That first section we call the duodenum or the duodenum. It's kind of C-shaped. It's not very big. It's the shortest, or not very long. It's the shortest section of small intestine, maybe about a foot or so, 10 centimeters. So that's less than a foot, 10 to 12 inches, not 10 centimeters, 10 to 12 inches. So it's about a foot is all. Okay, and then the jejunum is the next section. Okay, that's where we'll see a lot of absorption taking place. Oh, and by the way, backing up to the stomach real quick, the stomach is kind of blending or churning and mixing all of those little balls or boli that you swallow. And then as those boli now are kind of in a soup. So we have this blended soup called chyme. So we'll see that word coming up as well. Chyme, Chyme. Okay, so chyme is now the fluid that's leaving the stomach. At this point, as we leave the stomach and go into the small intestines, we start lipid digestion. For one thing, we've done carbs, proteins in the stomach, that carbs in the mouth, proteins in the stomach, now lipids or fats in the small intestines. But we continue the digestion of carbohydrates and certainly of protein. So all three are going to be digested in the small intestines. Okay. Fats begin there, whereas carbs in the mouth, proteins in the stomach. So just keep that in mind forever. Keep it in your long-term memory. Carbs in the mouth, proteins in the stomach, lipids or fats in the small intestines. And again, we do continue carb and protein digestion in that area. So that's a hot spot where the stomach enters, or where the chyme leaves the stomach and enters into the duodenum or the small intestine. This is an area where we see a lot of action. We see the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas associated with that area. I'm going to circle back to that. I want to continue through the tract itself before we look at those up there. So anyway, we go through the jejunum, the ileum, I-L-E-U-M, I-L-I-U-M, remember, is the portion of bone, the large portion of bone associated with your hips. So the ileum, I-L-E-U-M, that's the last section of small intestines. And again, small intestines, we continue the digestion of carbs, proteins. We begin the digestion of fats. And then we also start assimilating and absorbing the nutrients into the bloodstream. So we do see the small intestines being the site of a lot of absorption of nutrients into the bloodstream. So highly vascularized, a lot of capillary networks there. As we leave the small intestine through the ileum, we enter into the large intestine. The large intestine has a couple of sections. We'll see what we call the cecum, the first main section. It's a little pocket where the ileum and the cecum come together. There's a valve. So we have another valve or a sphincter called the ileocecal sphincter or ileocecal valve. Okay, so we've got sphincter, sphincter, sphincter. Okay, so again, and then there's another one, right, all the way toward the end of the line. We also see the appendix coming off of the cecum. So the appendix is a little appendage or branch off of the large intestine, specifically off of the cecum. So anyway, we're going to ascend through the large intestine, and then we're going to go transverse or across, and then we're going to descend the large intestine, and then we're going to head into what they call the sigmoid or the S curve, and then we're going to leave through the colon and rectum. Okay. So anyway, we'll look at the specifics coming up here in a few minutes. We'll go beyond just this illustration. Before we do, I also want to again mention the liver and the gallbladder, as well as the pancreas. These are major accessory organs to digestion. They're going to be secreting enzymes, especially the pancreas. We see a lot of exocrine features associated with the pancreas, and those enzymes being dumped directly into the duodenum. So we'll hone in on this area coming up shortly. And then the gallbladder, of course, also kind of connects with the pancreatic duct, and they all kind of, and the liver, they all secrete their juices. Some are enzymes. Bile is coming from the gallbladder, and potentially the liver is going to help aid in breaking down lipids or fats. So anyway, let's keep moving. So now I'm just kind of zoom through, give you a little tour of each of these spots with a little bit more with a little larger images zoomed in. Okay, so anyway, we do see a couple of layers of the digestive tract in that tube. The epithelial lining is what we call the mucosal layer. Okay, the mucosal layer. And then just deep to that mucosal layer is where we find the submucosa. That's going to be connective tissue. That's where we may find a blood supply. You can see lymphatic tissue there as well. This also is where we're going to find some of our glands are going to be kind of nestled in that submucosal layer and secreting into the lumen. Okay. So that's the mucosal layer. And then again, that pardon me, we could see some of these ducts go outside of that mucosal layer. And we can see the submucosal layer. Let me get my pointer, it's easier. So we have this mucosal layer, okay, mucus producing epithelium. Remember, glands are epithelium in origin, right? So we have a lot of, this is all epithelium. And then we have the submucosal, which is going to be the connective tissue area. Okay, the submucosal. And again, what do we see in connective tissue? That's where we find blood supply, nerve supply. Okay, so you can see the submucosal layer here. So mucosal, submucosal. And then we have what they call the muscular layer. You can kind of see this muscle, smooth muscle layer. So again, epithelium, connective, and then muscular. Okay, the muscular layer, mucosal, submucosal, muscular. And then the outermost layer is called the serosal layer, serosa. Okay. That's going to be connective tissue. Okay, so now we're working out more superficially. So deepest area is going to be the lumen with the mucosal epithelium. And then wrapped around that is the connective tissue submucosal layer. And then wrapped around that is the muscle layer. And then wrapped around the muscle layer is more connective tissue. We have fascia wrapped around or surrounding our skeletal muscle. So we have the serosa surrounding our smooth muscle of our digestive system. Yeah. Okay, so you're going to have the connective tissue, and then that's going to have a lining, right? Connective tissue. Then what's next is epithelium. So then there's going to be a covering around all of this. Okay, so the serosa is going to be connective tissue with a final layer of epithelium. So I hope you guys, at this point, kind of see the pattern of layers and the arrangement of items going all the way back to tissues. It's epithelium and connective and muscle. And then muscle can be connected to more connective tissue and then more epithelium, like a sandwich. So that's what we have. We've got the epithelium lining, we have the epithelium covering. Okay. And then connected to the epithelium is connective tissue. And then in between all of that is the meat or the muscle. Okay. Now, the the serosal layer is going to be also known as mesentery or mesentery. Okay. So this areolar connective tissue and this epithelial tissue that make up the serosa is called mesentery. This is all this would all be the lower GI tract. So this would be your small intestines and large intestines. And your stomach would all look a lot like this. The stomach will be slightly different. It's because it's going to be more stretched out. It's kind of a stretched out tube. So we're going to see more folds, but for the most part, it looks a lot like this underneath. Mesentery is the newest organ that they've named. They just named it. It's had the name mesentery for, I don't know, going all the way back to probably the 1400s, if not longer ago than that. But it was always considered to be the serosal layer, the kind of connective tissue, epithelial connective tissue surrounding of the GI tract. Well, they found that this serosal connective tissue and epithelium cells that make up those tissues are specialized. They're like no other cells in the body. So when you have a specific cell type that's specific to a tissue type, then that would mean it would be specific to an organ. So the organ then is mesentery. So that just happened in the last, I want to say, year or two. Within the last couple of years, mesentery has become labeled as an organ of the digestive system. It there, and you can see it has its own vascularization that's going to be contained within that connective tissue layer. But anyway, it's specialized cells, and they think these cells are going to aid in some of the lymphatic aspects, part of the kind of cleansing aspect as well. They're finding that there are some digestive issues that folks are having that they've been treating, thinking that it had to do with more of the small intestines, specifically cells of the small intestines, with the stomach specifically. So treating like acid reflux or GERD. When in reality, what they've found just recently is that some of these abdominal pains are actually not internal of the tract, but they're more superficial and deal with problems within the mesentery, with mesenteric inflammation. So inflammation is usually caused by either overuse or chronic infection or acute, any type of infection. So anyway, they're finding they're doing more research on the cells of the mesentery and how they can treat, how they can identify and then treat someone who has inflamed mesentery. So, anyway, that's up to date mesentery talk. Let's see. Here's this peristalsis idea that I was discussing earlier, where we put a bolus in the esophagus and we squeeze just above it. and it keeps moving down, squeeze above it, keeps moving down. So that's what we see going on here. Peristalsis, alternating waves of muscle contraction. And again, the digestive process involves ingestion and deglutition. And then we do that peristaltic wave to get all the boluses in the stomach. And then in the stomach is where we're going to start, we're going to continue mechanical digestion. It's a lot like a blender. And then we're going to see more chemical digestion of lipids in the small intestines, and then absorption of those nutrients. Now, the large intestine we'll see also does some absorption, but it also does some packaging of waste. So, all right, let's continue on with mouth all the way down to the large intestine. We look at the teeth and the tongue. Again, you guys aren't going to be required to know the specific types of teeth. I think knowing that you do have that are what are called deciduous teeth. Those are the teeth that you lose as a child. You have 20 of those, and then you replace those with 32 permanent teeth. So if you have your wisdom teeth out, then you have 28 teeth. We've looked at the tongue and some of those taste buds. Here are those glands, that parotid gland, and then we see the submandibular and sublingual. Okay. Now, again, these are going to be responsible for secreting amylase, as well as mucus and water, and keeping things hydrated. Again, this is more FYI, is showing those baby teeth or those deciduous teeth, and then the permanent teeth that come in. And again, these are all from open stacks. We won't really get into teeth anatomy. We've seen this before, something similar to it anyway, with the nasopharynx, oropharynx, laryngopharynx. Well, now they've showing it in conjunction with, again, the oral cavity as it relates to digestion, and the pharynx as it relates to digestion. Okay, and then as we swallow, we have our first sphincter in the pharyngeal area called the upper esophageal sphincter. And again, that epiglottis is going to close over the trachea when we swallow those boluses, boli. Okay. Then we continue down the esophagus and get to the lower esophageal sphincter and enter into the stomach. And again, we see those similar layers that we saw earlier, the mucosal, submucosal, muscular, and serosa. The primary aspect of the stomach we call the body of the stomach. And then up here in this area is what they call the fundic region. And then again, down here, we would call, so we have the cardiac and the fundic, and then the body and the pyloric. Okay, pyloric. Again, this oftentimes comes into play clinically with newborns. Some newborns have what we call projectile vomiting, right? Well, a lot of newborns kind of spit up, but if they're projectile vomiting, that usually means that something down here is stopped up. Okay, so sometimes we have to go in and do a procedure to get the pyloric sphincter or pyloric valve to open up. Okay. Remember, the valve's there to prevent backflow. Well, if the valve isn't working, you're going to get no flow, and if we keep putting liquid in there, then eventually it's going to shoot out. It doesn't have anywhere to go. You call it pyloric stenosis when pyloric doesn't work. Okay, so anyway, then we entered into the duodenum. This is the first section of small intestine. Before we get there, we look at the mucosal, that epithelial lining of the stomach, and we have these grooves or rugae or folds And then we end up with what they call their crypts. Okay? This whole thing is kind of like a gastric pit or a crypt. And within here, we're going to see specialized epithelial or glandular cells. So that's what they do is blow those up over here. And we see what are called parietal cells and chief cells. There are a couple other ones, but those are the two biggies, parietal cells and chief cells. Okay. So we'll see hydrochloric acid, pepsin, which is one of your digestive enzymes that helps to deal with protein digestion. Okay. We'll see something called gastrin. Okay. So anyway, we'll see a couple of chemicals next semester. We're not going to get too deep into them right now. In fact, we've gone as deep as we're going to get. Parietal and chief cells, okay, are specialized cells in the lining of the stomach. Okay, the stomach is going to secrete its enzymes. And again, this is getting into some physiology, so I don't want to spend too much time here. I do want to mention, though, that there is the beginnings of the stomach, and you guys know this from your own experience, but they actually have named that stomach growling or the process of thinking about food, seeing food, smelling food, hearing sizzling of bacon and clanging of dishes or pots and pans. Those are what they call cephalic, right? Cephalic means the head. The cephalic phase of digestion will actually start getting the ball rolling all the way down in the stomach. We start getting some enzymes prepared. Okay, so that's the cephalic phase. And then we actually consume the food. Gastric juices start being released or continue being released. We continue breaking down and kind of blending that food. And then we have the intestinal phase as we leave the stomach and go into the intestines, and a whole different set of enzymes and chemicals gets released. So as we enter into the small intestines, again, that first section is called the duodenum or the duodenum. And then the jejunum and the ileum. They're similar in length, the jejunum and ileum. The duodenum is the shortest. So know those DJI, duodenum, jejunum, ileum. That's the order of the digestive tract as we enter into the small intestines. And again, we're going to see crypts, little pits or crypts in the small intestines as well. We'll see more specialized enzymes coming from there. At this point, we're still going through kind of a peristaltic movement, but a rhythmic contraction. But we also see what's called segmentation going on, where we kind of remember that the soup that's leaving is called chyme, that leaves the stomach. So that blended mixture of boli, the boluses you swallow, all the food you swallowed, and then the stomach juices or gastric juices, all that's blended together called chyme. And there's the term there, CHYME. As chyme enters into the small intestines, we see what's called segmentation going on. It's basically like instead of like just squeezing and moving something down and then squeezing and above it and above it and above it to get it moving. Instead, we're kind of squeezing like this with the ball in the middle, called segmentation. And what this does, as we squeeze here, we can also squeeze in between and kind of break that up even further. So it's almost like it could just continues. It's like a specialized blending process. So the stomach is like just a general big mic, kind of a macro, I should say, blender. Once everything gets in the small intestines, it's a little more finite, it's a little more micro, and we can really isolate and segment these little sections of chyme that contain the nutrients. And what that does, again, is it enables all those carbs, proteins, and fats that ultimately we want to become glucose, simple sugars, amino acids, and fatty acids. This is the construction and the function that is taking place. So anyway, segmentation, and we also again then see absorption gives time for then again more absorption. So things slow down. From mouth to stomach takes what? A few seconds, right? Doesn't take long for your food to go from your mouth to your stomach. Once food is in your stomach's actually going to kind of blend it and mix it and do its thing for anywhere from 2 to 6, maybe even longer, but the range is about 4 to 6 hours. Okay, 2 on the low end, phew, 8, 10, 12 on the high end. Food will sit in the stomach. The more protein you eat in a sitting, the bigger especially animal protein, but really any proteins, right? Because protein digestion begins in the stomach. So if you consume a ton of protein and just keep, you really bloat up the stomach, that can sit in there for a long time on the high end of the range, maybe 6 to 8 hours. Whereas if you eat a couple of bites of if you eat an apple and an orange and some grapes, those are carbs, those are sugars, very minimal amounts of proteins or fats in those. Your stomach, hopefully they're very liquidy, watery. Your stomach, they're not going to spend much time in the stomach. Okay. So anyway, food spends roughly 4 hours in the stomach. Now it's going to spend maybe 12 to 16 hours or more, potentially even up to 20 hours in the small intestines. So they're long too. Small intestines are 15 to 18 feet. Okay, small intestines 12 to 18 feet, even 15, 18, even up to 20 feet, depends on the person. But around that, in the teens of feet. So of course the food's going to be there a little longer, but it stays there quite a bit longer, uh, again, to maximize digestion and absorption of the nutrients. So anyway, as we leave the small intestines, hopefully a lot of our nutrients have been absorbed. We're in the ileum, and that connects again with the cecum. So that ileum cecum connection, there's going to be a valve there. This is the beginning of the large intestine. Okay. And again, we have the appendix coming off of the cecum. And then we're going to ascend through the large intestine. They call it the ascending colon. Then we go across. They call this the transverse colon. And then we descend into the sigmoid colon. Okay. And then finally into the rectum. Okay. Notice too, we've got kind of a pocket here. We've got a curve up here. We've got a curve here. Then we got a big curve here and another one here. The large intestines, they have little pockets or folds. Okay. So we'll see those shortly, called haustra. And we also have what are called diverticuli. So the colon is kind of slowly packaging and absorbing water. So as chyme leaves the small intestines, the nutrients hopefully have been absorbed. So we're left with a bunch of liquid, a bunch of water, kind of dirty water at that point. By the way, too, the lining of the small intestines is constantly sloughing off. And it's like stratified, kind of like cuboidal. Okay, like stratified cuboidal. So it's a little sort of like your skin, stratified squamous, but the cells are a little thicker. But they slough off in a similar way that your skin would. So the epithelial lining of the intestines, small intestines especially, is shedding frequently. In fact, the bulk of what your fecal matter is actually lining is dead epithelial cells. Okay. Wonderful, right? So it's food waste, right? We eat food. There are certain parts of the food we can't absorb and break down enough. So of course we're going to poop some of that out. But the bulk of what you're pooping is going to be lining of your intestines. Wonderful, right? All right. So the colon is going to package and that waste and absorb the nutrients that are left, primarily absorbing water. All right. So travel, 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 and then finally we get out um, of the digestive tract, through the rectum and then the anus. So these curves, though, as you know, we can get what's called fecal impaction in these curves. We can get constipation, of course, occurring. So what fiber does is it kind of roto roots all these little hostra or these little diverticuli. These are like little caverns in here. Okay, so stuff gets impacted in there. What fiber does is it kind of like a bristle brush gets all that moved out. So that's why it's important to consume fiber. It's one of the lowest consumed items in the American diet. They tell us we aren't getting enough fiber. That means we're all full of shit, I think, is what that, pardon my French, I hope there's no, but that's what it means. If we're all lacking fiber, then we better get on it because that means we've got a lot of poop in here. So you really should, it takes from mouth to toilet roughly 24 hours. They say 12 to 24. So that's a range. So ideally you should poop at least once a day. If you're eating every day, you should poop every day. So what the doctor tells us. It's also what anatomy tells us too. So that's a case where we can all agree on that one. Pooping once a day is healthy. All right. So again, here are these hostra, these little kind of bumps or ridges of the colon. Yeah, and then so anyway, that's where we're going to back up and look at some of these accessory organs. Again, the liver and the gallbladder, they're going to be connected. The liver is responsible for a whole lot of jobs. So next semester we'll get into the functions, but for now, just know the liver is a large filter. It does have a couple of different lobes. It's primarily the right lobe of the liver is the largest of the lobes. Left lobe is a little bit more pointed, less rounded. We do see the gallbladder nestled more or less in kind of the right, under the right lobe of the liver in the right upper quadrant of the abdominal region. We have a couple of ducts associated with the liver and gallbladder. The first duct, as it comes out of the liver, they call the hepatic duct, right? Hepa or hepatic, anything hepa means liver. Okay, HEPA. Okay, so the hepatic duct is going to leave the liver. It's going to join up with what we call the cystic duct. Cystic, a cyst, C-Y-S-T, means bladder. So the cystic duct connects the gallbladder with the hepatic duct. Okay. And then the two of them are going to join up and form what we call the common bile duct. So, and they do show a right and left hepatic duct. That's fine. For now, just know that you have a hepatic duct joining with a cystic duct, and they form the common bile duct. Okay. Common bile duct is then going to join up with this pancreatic duct, and they're going to dump into the duodenum or the duodenum. So liver, gallbladder, pancreas all dump into the duodenum or duodenum. Okay. The pancreas is secreting a lot of digestive enzymes. It's secreting what are called amylases, like what we saw up here. It's secreting proteases, similar to what we would see in the stomach. It's secreting lipases for fats. Okay. Also secretes a few other items. So um, it secretes bicarbonate ion. Bicarbonate helps with buffering some of this acidic chyme. As you know, the acidity or the pH in the stomach is really low. So it's like around 2, maybe even a little lower. And so we don't want to poop out something that's that acidic. And so as we leave the stomach, we need to get that pH, more neutralized. So bicarbonate helps to neutralize some of that acidity in the chyme from the stomach. Okay. Now the gallbladder is secreting something we call bile, bile. Bile is going to help emulsify fat. And what that just means is it kind of breaks up fat glob. So if I've got a big fat globule and I put bile on top of it, I cover this ball with bile, it's going to break it into smaller balls. These balls are still not digestible. So we need lipase at that point. So now that so it's bile is like the first step to getting fats digested. So, well, the first step is you have to consume them, but chemically speaking, you have to put bile on a fat globule in order to make it smaller and more manageable. So when a lipase or an enzyme is added, then we'll see the fat globules break down better. We know when a patient has bile or gallbladder issues, one reason is because they may have what's called a fatty stool. So fats are not being absorbed into their body, they're being pooped out. So if that's the case, then the gallbladder may not be secreting bile. The liver also secretes some bile. So I have a gallbladder liver problem. Maybe they're secreting bile, and so I'm getting fat globules, but the pancreas, which secretes lipase that breaks down those fat globules, maybe that's not working. So anyway, we can glean a lot of information potentially from a stool sample regarding the quality of the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. And you can see this is a good illustration. You can see the pancreatic duct kind of joining up with that common bile duct and then dumping. We can also see a couple of spots where the pancreas can dump into the duodenum. Okay. And remember, the pancreas is also so this is exocrine, right? It's excreting into a duct, right? So digestive enzymes come from the exocrine cells of the pancreas, whereas endocrine cells, so we looked at the alpha, beta, delta, right? Those cells are going to relate to the endocrine system, which is insulin and glucagon. So anyway, the pancreas is the only endocrine and exocrine gland in the body. We've seen more of it, pancreatic cancer, right? Alex Trebek, Jeopardy guy, just died of pancreatic cancer. Aretha Franklin, the RESPECT singer, she died of pancreatic cancer. I think I, there's, I want to say the senator down in Alabama, I think he just died of pancreatic cancer. John Lynch. So anyway, more and more people, we're seeing more pancreatic cancer, and it's going to be the exocrine cells that seemingly are affected. We call these acinar cells. Acinar cells. So these are acinar cells that are secreting digestive enzymes, and those are traveling ultimately into the duodenum and helping with breaking down carbs, proteins, and fats. These cells out here are called island cells or islet cells. These are the ones that secrete the hormones, pancreatic islets. So they're dumping hormones into the bloodstream. These acinar cells are dumping into the duodenum. So the fact that we're seeing cancers of these cells versus these cells could tell us that these cells are being disrupted by maybe something that's coming into the digestive system, and it's working its way into here and altering how these function. They're trying to figure out what's going on, or they're saying something delivered in the bloodstream to feed these cells is causing them to be overactive mitotically. But anyhow, there are a couple of prescription drugs that were passed through the FDA within the last decade or so that they're starting to link to pancreatic cancers. So anyway, yeah, not good. Unfortunately, it's a silent kind of killer. So oftentimes the cancer develops and metastasizes and spreads up toward the liver, and then maybe gets and spreads into the intestines and gets into the islet cells, and then it's in the bloodstream. So it can metastasize quick before someone even knows it. One of the key features is there'll be a tumor on the pancreas blocking the entrance of, or I guess the exit of the common bile duct, and the pancreatic duct can't secrete their juices into the duodenum because there's a tumor right here. Okay? So what happens is bile builds up, and then they come in and they have jaundice and a yellowy orange skin, orange eyes. Bad news, unfortunately. When an adult patient comes in with jaundice, it's typically not good news, unfortunately. I mean, there are a lot of things that patients come in with every single day. We can help them, they'll get better. They come in again, we help them, they get better, get them on a protocol, a plan. But yeah, this is a bugger. This one sucks. So, but thankfully, there's more awareness now and more research being done to prevent it. Curing pancreatic cancer is not easy. So we need to figure out how to prevent it. We want to know why in the heck these folks were getting it. And they have some pretty good ideas of what may be causing it. Because 25 years ago, when I first got into it's been longer anyway, early 90s now, almost 30 years, 28 years ago. I mean, it was almost unheard of. I mean, it was like one in a million. Now it's not, like 1 in 100,000. So things are dropping dramatically. So anyway, again, here's the gallbladder. We can see that what we call the cystic duct and the common hepatic duct, or just hepatic duct. So hepatic duct, cystic duct, they become the common bile duct. And again, we've seen this before. Mechanical, chemical digestion, deglutition, mastication, deglutition. And then we get some more mechanical digestion. We get more chemical digestion. Okay. So that's pretty much it. These last couple slides, I think this is this is definitely physiology. This gets into nutrition and the I guess more functional aspects of the digestive system. Again, the goal is to get carbs, so starches, glycogen, okay, broken down all the way into glucose, fructose, and galactose. Okay, so these are your monosaccharides. So we go from the big starches, we add some amylase, and then we get what are called disaccharides. The three are maltose, sucrose, lactose. And then we add these three enzymes in the small intestines, maltase, sucrase, lactase. And then we get from maltase, we're from maltose, adding maltase gives us two glucoses. Sucrose, so this is your white granulated sugar. Add sucrase, you're going to get glucose and fructose. Lactose, which is in milk, of course, and dairy, we add lactase, we're going to get a glucose and what we call galactose. So these are single ringed 6-carbon, 5-carbon ring sugars. Again, that gets into some chemistry. Protein, again, primarily thinking the stomach. Protein digestion is, again, hydrochloric acid and something called pepsin. And what do these proteins become? Of course, they become amino acids. Okay. Small intestines, of course, again, are going to be the major site of carbohydrate and protein digestion. But we do see quite a bit of it in the stomach. Again, we start with large polypeptides, proteins. Large polypeptides become short peptides and amino acids. Okay. And again, we would add some sort of ACE enzyme in here. Okay. Water absorption is complex. Okay. It's 200 mLs in. Okay. Saliva secretions 1500 mLs. Gastric secretions 1500 mLs. So there's a lot of water, and then we reabsorb roughly that same amount. So water in, water reabsorption, and then we'll see the kidneys next week playing a role in water balance and water maintenance with the digestive tract. But this is, again, this is physiology. I don't want to get the cart before the horse by any means. Okay. So fat, lipid absorption, lipid digestion. Again, we're going to see that occur in the small intestines. We have to add some bile to break down, and this is called emulsify. So emulsify is, again, breaking these large fat globules into smaller fat globules, micelles, that then can be affected by lipase. And lipases are enzymes that are going to continue to break down these micelles and allow them to enter into the epithelial cells and travel ultimately into the capillary network. Okay, so again, too much physiology, but I did want to introduce you to at least some of the very basics of these ideas and concepts. So that's it today. I just wanted to go from mouth to anus. Digestion begins in the mouth, pretty much ends, the actual process of digestion is going to end in the large intestines. We don't really see a lot of absorbing of nutrients, but we do see absorption of water. We do see certainly some packaging of the waste material. So, anyway, know the three pairs of salivary glands. Of course, we already know the mouth. Know the esophagus and that upper esophageal sphincter and lower esophageal sphincter entering into the stomach, and then those ranges of those areas of the stomach the cardiac region. I meant to say not ranges, the regions of the stomach, the cardiac, fundic, body, pyloric regions. Then we entered into the small intestine. So knowing those three sections in order as we continued: duodenum, jejunum, ileum. Then we saw another sphincter, right? Well, we saw the pyloric sphincter as we left the stomach. And then as we leave small intestines, we get to another sphincter, okay, in the ileocecal valve or ileocecal sphincter. That's where we find then the beginning of the large intestine called the cecum, ascending, transverse, descending sigmoid, all colon, the big C, and then into the rectum, and then the anus. So from mouth to anus, that's the one long tube. It's again slightly modified. Mucosal lining, epithelium, submucosal, just deep to that, connective tissue, muscular layer, deep to that, smooth muscle. And then finally, the outer layer, the serosa or serosal layer, again, a little connective, a little epithelial, making that mesentery or mesentery. Okay. Let's see. And then there are accessories. Again, the salivary glands, the parotid, submandibular, and sublinguals. And then we had the liver, gallbladder, pancreas, and the ducts associated with those: pancreatic duct, bile duct, cystic, and hepatic, forming that bile duct. So other than that, those are the basics of the structures of the GI tract and the digestive system. Not sure what happened. That's what I mean. A lot of technical difficulties today. There we go.